Hey, welcome. This is Basketbros. It's another Sunday night. We had an awesome weekend in sports as well as week. If you watch the NFL draft and you're as static as I am, only if you're a Texans fan, we finally got our quarterback and some more pieces. It's great. Also got the my Astros on TV playing the Phillies and whatnot. But we are here to talk about some throwback basketball. I am Denzel Snipes. You can find me at NillyNil13 on Twitter and Denzel Snipes on Facebook as well. And we have a loaded show for you all, as you all may have seen during the advertisement that I so graciously put out. But you know what? Let's go ahead and get the crew in here. He is the architect of the South Florida Tribune. Let me tell you something. Every single Wednesday, this man comes with more heat than a furnace. Whoever's on, they go around, they speak their pieces. He conducts everything. This is the Sports Exchange, which is on Wednesday night. So go to the South Florida Tribune on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter as well, and subscribe and tune into these episodes. He's the pilot of everything. His co-pilot's Candy Ebeling. Sometimes they swap out and she's, pilot and he's co-pilot and whatnot. But look, South Florida Tribune Airlines is the greatest way to fly. This is Scott, Motor City Madman. Come on in here, brother.
You know, Denzel, you make Don King look like a bad promoter. You know that? You really do.
I thought he already was a bad promoter.
But no, that's a great intro. My goodness. Do the best I can. We try to fly in high depending on how much Mountain Dew I've had, but not a whole lot today. Just enough to get me through this show and then some, knowing I have a real busy weekend. Then again, they're all busy. So what the heck is the difference? I enjoy being on the basketball show. I have a real big history in the sport in the past, not the way they play the game this day, where it's a jump shooting league and defense is like a foreign language. And of course, we know hard-nosed basketball to me doesn't exist anymore. But other than that, the sport still has a history. But I enjoy being on all of our shows, Basketbros, Pundit, and the list goes on and on. Possibly the Gauntlet down the line company. Wherever you need me, I'm always here to try to give you everything I've got. And the reason why I'm wearing the Miami Marlins hat today, in case everybody wanted to know, okay, they did sweep the Chicago Cubs. Sorry, JB Ellis. I hope you enjoy your retirement. But I know you're not enjoying this weekend, but life is what it is. So
he got a cake and a cigar. He's fine.
Yeah, I really feel bad for him.
Shout out to JB. And this Wednesday,
to the Windy City.
And this Wednesday, coming on Confidential.
Yeah, I'll be on there too. So, it is what it is. I know that I'm looking forward to talk about the Cubs and the Miami Marlins. There's a lot to talk about. The Marlins won 3 straight games by 1 run. They won 10 straight 1-run games as well. So, I know that JB is a real big Cubs fan, but, and I like talking Cubs when we chat back and forth. So it is what it is.
Of course. And also adding on to the crew is our resident Hornets fan, and he just got back from a wedding, his brother's wedding, and he's so gracious that he could make it on. And this is DJ Willie V. Wolvogel. How you doing? Hey, you know what, man? Every single time you say like, "Hey, man, I got something going on, I can't make the show," my immediate thought is he's going to be on the show, because I don't care what it is you say you can't make it, you always end up making it. So. But how you doing,
what's
man?
so funny about the nickname DJ Willie V? I'm at the party, and they had live music outside, and there's a sound. I don't know if it's in everyone's city. You can only play live music till like 11 p.m. for noise ordinance. So
Right.
We go inside, and there's this guy DJ, and he's setting up, and I'm like, "What's your name? Where are you from?" His name's like, "My name's Will," and I'm like, "Oh my God, there's this guy I have a podcast with who calls me DJ Willie V," and he's like, "Are you a DJ though?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not even close to a DJ.
It's just a name.
But I take the title anyway with the pride." But
hey,
it's been
I got to tell you this, my friend, okay? I know at the circus they have jugglers, right? Where they have the batons. I've never seen a broadcasting juggler, but you're the first. So you can take it whatever it's worth. Hey, we're glad to have you on tonight.
Hey, I'll take it.
You're juggling around. But I can pull it out. I'll pull it up there.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, jugglers are actually a pretty good act.
Things doesn't fall.
Yeah, when I'm at a circus, I do enjoy watching the jugglers, and all that. So you to me, take care of the circus fix here on all these shows with the juggling bag and boy.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Just don't ask them to tame any tigers or jump through flaming hoops.
Part-time circus performer.
That's okay.
It looks like
It's
it's a
all
woman.
good. Well, it don't matter.
Well, everyone, if you would divert your eyes to the bottom of the screen real quick, if you are watching us on one of these platforms, you can watch us on the other two as well. So, Sideline Sports on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Hit that like and subscribe button. We've got a plethora of shows, Confidential, as mentioned. Scott's got the South Florida Tribune. We've also got the Gauntlet. We have the Sideline Sports Show. There's also Ball Don't Lie, Gary and Stein Stevens. Cold Hard Truth, you name it, we got it. Mike Carrot-Noodle has the Pac-12 coverage, and we have more to come. And also John Shearer with Oh What a Show, that might be spinning back up here shortly. So stay tuned for that. But Sideline Sports is where it's at. And so before we really get started, shout out to Jacob Christner. He's under the weather tonight. I was going to have him do this. So the backstory goes, and as you've probably seen on a previous telecast of Basketbros, is for the last couple of years with the NBA carousel here on Sideline Sports, Jacob Christner was the representative for the Sacramento Kings. And we also did a segment on their miracle run into the postseason. Well, their miracle run came to an end just an hour ago, a few hours ago, whatever. The Warriors eliminated the Kings 120-100 in Game 7. It was a hell of a series. Speaking of a jump shooting league, Scott, Curry put up a 50-piece on the Kings, and so they will move on to face LeBron and the Lake Show. So I just wanted to solo screen them and give them about 2-3 minutes and give us a recap on the Kings' miracle run season and also what's in their future.
Thank you very much. Well, number one, Mike Brown took the most difficult job on the planet. He went to the Sacramento Kings. Okay. They go through coaches more than politicians tell lies. Okay. This is not a political show, it's a reality show. So when you talk about the fact that organization goes through a lot, and there was a demand by the ownership in Sacramento, they needed to get him in the playoffs. Well, guess what? This year, a 17-year playoff drought went downtown. Okay, bang. So I'm glad that the Sacramento Kings snapped that drought. It's a very tough drought when you have long droughts like that, because you wonder if the fan base will ever have any hope. And they do indeed. It really is a great sports town. I've had an opportunity to see a couple Kings games at their initial arena where they had 10,000 plus, followed by the arena that they have after that. Now I understand they're building a brand new one. So that's a franchise that's stacked with a lot of good young players. They really, really are. Domantas Sabonis is a really good player. And then, of course, De'Aaron Fox is another one. So they've got a lot of good potential. I actually thought they had a chance to win this series when they won in Golden State. But when you have a guy that puts up a 50 spot against you and he's a champion, well, it's pretty hard to overcome that. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing but upside for a franchise that once upon a time, called Kansas City Omaha, their home until they wound up going into the capital city of California. So, here's a team that's had Chris Webber on it before, Rick Adelman led them to a championship. So I've always really enjoyed one major sports town, because, they're the only game in town. And, everything revolves around them. I work with one now with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when you get winning, man, you talk about a rabid fan base, you definitely have it there. So if I were the Golden State fans, I should be thankful that I got through this and this was a scare and that Steph Curry came up at a big time. If I were the Sacramento Kings, you know what? You had a fine year. You have an excellent coach. Keep Mike Brown around. And you might find that this guy here is arguably one of the best coaches in the NBA. He won a championship with, I believe, he's won championships in the past, so he knows what it's like to drink the champagne. So kudos to you, Sacramento Kings. I think the future is nothing more than just totally, totally bright. And let me tell you, some of your best basketball is ahead of you in Northern California. Golden State, you are lucky. You have a lot of good players. You haven't been playing well, but you picked a great opportunity to win 2 road games when you lost 30 on the road during the regular season, which was awful. So, what else is there to say? Now we move on to the NBA playoffs. And I think being a guy that has been around the Detroit Pistons, there are certain stages that when you make the playoffs, you get to a certain spot and then you grow and you grow and you grow and you take one step at a time deeper. And before long, you have the makings of a championship team. If you hit it right in the draft and make an occasional trade that works for you, and before long, you have yourself a championship caliber basketball team. So that's my end here for talking about the Sacramento Kings. And like I said, there's a good nucleus in place. Just the only hope is that they can go ahead and stay healthy and they can continue to mature as a team. So that's it from my end.
Excellent commentary. Appreciate that, Mr. Scott Morganroth, on your commentary on the Sacramento Kings. Future is definitely bright. I would like to think that there is more than one West team that's put on notice as far as the future of the Kings, because we could very well see a rematch next year, and the Kings may get them. I mean, they were that close. There's a team
I think the cities are only located 45 minutes apart. I've actually taken that drive from Sacramento to Golden State before when I was in the Bay Area covering sports out there. So I have taken it. So anytime you have a rivalry within about an hour away, let me tell you, that could get pretty interesting. So Golden State, I think, was fortunate. They played good basketball when they needed to. But Sacramento, beware of the Kings. They're no longer the Sacramento Queens, as Shaquille O'Neal once said. And by the way, whether we want to talk about things coming full circle or not, Shaquille O'Neal was like a consultant for the Sacramento Queens at one point. Well, I don't know if you knew that, but he was. So,
Yes, I remember that.
Turn a little bit. What's that?
I do remember that, yes.
Right. So, it's amazing how things change, but there's a whole lot of potential up there. There really is. And the best thing is they got the right coach. I think ownership has to stay with Mike Brown and don't get impatient. If they do stay with him, then at long last lives the king. No pun intended, the Lion King.
I'll add something real fast. I know we've got a show. Scott hit the nail on the head. People look out for the Kings. This team could be good for years to come. You got Sabonis in a trade, which was you traded a young Garden Halliburton, but Sabonis is getting better year by year. I actually saw the Kings play last year, not this year. You got De'Aaron Fox. You got Murray from Iowa, who's a great rookie. You got Malik Monk, a good role player.
Right.
You got a good locker room. You got a good coach. And this team at one point was in danger of moving. They were like, oh, are we going to go to Vegas? Are we going to go to Seattle?
Right.
But you know what? The NBA has to wake up now and say, like, rub their eyes and wake up and say, man, these guys have passionate fans. We should not make this team move or consider moving them again, because if you looked at the playoff games, the arenas look almost 100% full. That's what you get with dedicated fans who haven't seen the playoffs in 16 plus years, and it's really good to see that that the Sacramento Kings are back to the days of old when they had like Chris Webber.
Well, if you've ever seen a game in Sacramento, and I've been fortunate enough over the years to see a couple, both in the older arena and then the newer one, there's no question they're great fans. I think they got that behind them, and they're working towards getting a new arena. So I think any concern you may have is probably no longer necessary. They're working in the right direction. I know there was a point when they were looking at moving to Seattle, but that obviously got taken away. So the main thing is they're stable, they have a good coach, and everything you said is completely accurate. There's no debating that. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it'll be like the hey, what was the film Major League when the owner was looking at moving the team, so she was hoping they would lose, and then they started winning. Maybe it'd be a case like this.
I don't know.
Right,
I watched the film a few times, but I don't remember it. And yet, baseball is my sport. So my wife, I have a really weak point about watching movies. I can't sit still. I guess I might have a little bit of Will Vogel anxiety when it comes to movies, but don't take it personal. Will, I'm the only guy that's probably ever been in a theater because people out there, for me, they tell me to shut up inside a theater, so I don't go to them anymore. I said, wow.
Okay.
None taken, man. None taken.
No, I know. I just think out loud. Unfortunately, my neighbors don't like it. So, I've had some good times in the studio, then, the cinema and the others, but I won't get into a lot of that because we have a show in front of us. So.
Yeah. Well, moving on to our next topic, and as you've noticed, the name displays in the banner is Celtics green, but we're not here to talk about Jason Tatum or Jalen Brown. We're here to talk about our Basketbros legend, head coach Red Auerbach. Scott, I'm waiting to hear from you on this one. But a
Yeah,
little bit
let's see
about
what.
the man. He is a nine-time NBA. He was the head coach of the Boston Celtics for 17 years, from 1950 to 1966. He's a nine-time NBA champion. It's the guy that coached Bill Russell, right? NBA Coach of the Year in 1965. 11-time NBA All-Star Game head coach. He's on the NBA 25th and 35th anniversary team. He's a top 10 coach in NBA history, a top 15 coach also in NBA history, and number two retired by the Boston Celtics. As an executive, he's a seven-time NBA champion, and he won Executive of the Year in 1980. So we talk about those who, well, he didn't play, but I mean, wearing the hats of head coach and executive, and he did both proficiently. His head coaching record, he's 938 wins, 479 losses for a win percentage of .662. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame as a coach. Before I pass it on to Will, I just want to point something out here. They say everything is generational, as well as cycling. Scott, I'm sure you've seen, like
Yeah,
just things. This is generational, okay? Because before there was a Pat Riley, before there were, we're talking about perennial goats here, right? So before there was a Pat Riley, and then after him was Phil Jackson. Then after him was Greg Popovich. There was this guy, Red Auerbach. You have a combined 16. Do you even have enough fingers? 16 rings between being a coach and executive. That is crazy. Like, man, the man died in 2006, and I'm sure they put all 16 rings in his casket. They had to have. But you talk about a dude who was iconic in his own right, and he came from an era of the tough as nails head coaches, those who were privileged to play under this man could understand how tough he was and be appreciative of the same. I'm not sitting here saying that the coaches now are not tough or anything like that, but just like we talk so much about the generation of players back then versus how it is now, you talk about coaching as well, because we talk about what we see on the court, right? And what these
right.
players go through and what they put up with. But what is rarely talked about is what these coaches go through. How many sleepless nights did Phil Jackson have on his way to 9 rings? How many sleepless nights in planning did Greg Popovich have on his way to 5 rings? How many sleepless nights did Red Auerbach have on his way to being a 9-time champion as a coach? Then he turns around as an executive. He has his own sleepless nights and planning and everything else on his way to 7 more rings. And this is the stuff that we don't see. This is the stuff that doesn't get talked about. The stuff that wears you down as a coach. But it's well worth it because he's got 16 reasons as to why it's worth it. But I want to pass it on to Will. Will, your thoughts on one of the perennial GOATs that I don't know why they don't talk about this man. You talk about Bill Russell and all his rings, and that's fine. But what about the guy that put him in that position? Red Auerbach, it's on you, Will.
You're 100%. We talk about the players he have, um, Heinsohn and many others, Russell, others, but nobody talks about the legend Red Auerbach and who he was, what he did. This guy was, like you said, he was before Phil Jackson, he was before Pat Riley. This guy was the staple of a head coach back then. Him, Vince Lombardi, John Wooden, hard nosed coaches. Um, Auerbach was the first one to develop the fast break offense, to introduce it. He also was a revolutionary. He drafted the first African American player in NBA history.
Mm.
He is known, as we all know and basketball fans know, the cigar celebration,
Oh, yeah.
where he pulls out the cigar. Look at the people who do it now. Every NBA champion does it. Football players do it now. Joe Burrow does it. Um, and then the winner of the Coach of the Year nowadays for the NBA, gets a Red Auerbach trophy
Right.
named his honor. I agree. Like, sure, you got many other coaches in NBA history. It could have gone to like Phil Jackson or Greg Popovich, but I'm sorry. Like, I get it. Phil Jackson probably, I think he passed him in wins. Red Auerbach is still the best coach in NBA history in my mind. he also coached in different levels. He coached in high school, then he went Basketball Association of America, then he went to college as an assistant, then he went to the Tri-City Blackhawk or Bayhawks, then he went to summer ball, and then he became the Celtics coach, then he went to become the GM, the president, and then the vice chairman. But what more can you say about Red Auerbach? He coached some of the best players in NBA history. He was the guy who orchestrated the orchestra. He was the conductor. He wasn't the GM, but he was the conductor of that team, that locker room, gelled them together to win multiple championships. And it's sad because nowadays, no one, like, even in media, you don't really hear his name. Like, whenever I hear basketball shows or TNT or whoever, and they're like, oh, here's the pantheon of champions. Do you remember when Phil Jackson led the Bulls to championships? No one talks about Red Auerbach. And it's just so disrespectful because this guy did so much, not only for the Celtics, but for the game of basketball on all levels, like I said.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like for every Phil Jackson, for every Greg Popovich and any other coach, and even Steve Kerr, you could throw him in there. Yeah, and of course there were gentlemen, that were before Red Auerbach. You know what I mean? But Auerbach was like the first, like as far as coaches go, he was like the first, like kind of titan. You know what I mean? The first, like kind of dynasty, and it was great. But I want to swing it over to Scott and get your thoughts about Red Auerbach.
Well, let me expound upon what Will said for a moment, then I'll go into what I have to say. Okay, number
Mhm.
one, Will, the saddest part about sports is nobody knows about the history of the game. Nobody. Fans, players, nobody. Let me give
While
you a
we do the
story.
show.
Yeah, so let me give you a story that I'm going to go back to when I was covering the Detroit Tigers and Tampa Bay Rays over at Tropicana Field. I approached a guy by the name of Mike Maroth. Okay, he's wearing Mickey Loach's 29 jersey. He said, Mike, ever heard of Mickey Lolich? I'm just screwing around, just throwing out. Never heard of him. What? Really? And by the way, you know who's sitting with me behind me in the dugout? Guy, you ever heard of Troy Percival? Want to play with Okie?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I said, Mike, you don't know anything about Mickey Lolich? Really? I said, Troy, I'm not trying to make this guy look bad, but he don't know about Mickey Lolich on the iconic time. And then Troy did a, like, really? You don't know nothing about him? Players don't know the history of what preceded them to get where they're at. Well, that's just the way it is, buddy. I know you've never been in a clubhouse locker room. I don't know if you've been in a dugout, MLB one, but you know what? Nowadays, people don't know the history of the game. I mean, I won't turn out certain people. I even asked a person one time, a young PR person, if they knew about Tommy Lasorda. They didn't even know it. But I think the
What?
kid's only 25 years old too, so
I
you can't.
love Tommy Lasorda.
But that's not the point. So it's not a disrespect, okay, toward Red Auerbach, okay. What? But the reality is, this generation just doesn't know a lot of what took place in yesteryear. Again, I'm not knocking this particular individual. It's not the point. It's a generational thing. Well, I mean, think about ESPN, the most recent gaffe about Damar Hamlin and that near fatal accident. Nobody talked about Chuck Hughes, though, did they? The guy that actually died on the field. And by the way, I was at that game with George Eichhorn. And yet ESPN could not get it right. And Herman Edwards is the biggest idiot I've ever seen, and never follow him anymore because he thought this never happened in the game of football. Oh, really? You're 68 years old, Herm, right? Okay. Herman Edwards could have been Herman the Munster or the Dumpster, okay? Because he didn't know about Chuck Hughes dying, okay, as a result. But yet, the only two people on the ESPN network that knew about it was Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, and nobody else knew it on the network. And since then, I probably don't watch that network anymore unless the NFL draft, because I have no respect for the lack of journalism or research that you do on key matters before you put your foot in your mouth. Now, not to change the subject like I did moments ago, but let's go back to Red Auerbach, okay? Did you guys realize, why Dick Vitale is no longer in the NBA? Do you, Will? You know a lot. I'm going to ask you.
To be honest, I've heard you say it, but I can't even remember.
That's
To
okay.
be
Well, that's
honest.
fair. Okay. I kind of figured because I know it's hard for you to remember everything I say because I say a whole lot anyway. So if I thought you'd remember everything I say, we put a genius cap on top of your brown hair. Okay. And then that'd be a different situation. Do you know Dens?
I'd heard years ago, and that it, but
Okay.
I know he used to be in the, and obviously it's probably got something to do with Auerbach. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, I know. I figured. That's why I want to ask you guys before I mention the answer. You want to talk about a fleece job that I've ever seen in NBA sports? Okay. NBA? What about where Dick Vitale adamantly wanted Bob McAdoo? Adamantly wanted Bob McAdoo. So Auerbach got a couple of draft choices that turned into Cornbread Maxwell. And I believe the other one, kind of I'm trying to remember, was Cornbread Maxwell and Kevin McHale, I think was part of that trade too. I'd have to go back, but we could go back. So he fleeced Vitale. Vitale had a tough couple-year run over in Detroit. Subsequently, his next job after the Pistons get it, he became an NBA. He became a basketball analyst for ESPN. So we could just sit here and say that, to put a long story short, Red Auerbach retired Dick Vitale from coaching, and you want to talk about a fleece job, that was as big a fleece job as it could get. Now, let's talk about the NBA when he was coaching. Red Auerbach never lost any sleep, guys. Let me tell you that. You guys are way off. He don't lose sleep over nothing. It's the people that lose sleep because they got fleeced all the time by the guy that lost sleep. You talk about a genius, okay? He did. He won those championships back in the 50s. Russell took over. Great. You know, he knew how to evaluate players and he knew how to coach them and press their buttons. As a general manager, he took his evaluation skills and put it in another level in the front office. So yeah, there's a reason why you have 16 rings. It doesn't matter if you put them on your hands, feet, stick them in the collar. It doesn't really matter. But the reality is a genius, no matter how you slice it. You know, I mean, I don't think any of those other guys that won multiple championships that lost, they earned them. They worked hard. What about you guys talk about the 16 rings? How about the guys that he mentored that won more rings?
True.
You mentioned that, do you? Right? Right.
True.
Well,
True.
you got a guy that mentored people, okay, and then he got them himself. What about Danny Ainge? Don't you think he was an intricate part of one of those, that Danny Ainge learned under Red Auerbach?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. So, and I'm just using Danny. What about all these other coaches that coached under him? Okay.
Coach Bird learned from him. Larry Bird learned a lot from him.
But hold on. You got Larry Bird, you got Casey Jones learned a lot, right? ML Carr, who's another former Piston, went over to the Celtics and had a pretty good career as well. So
Bill Russell, when he became a coach.
Who?
Bill Russell. He hired Bill Russell.
So yeah, from what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong. He was a player coach after Auerbach stepped aside.
Yes, he was the guy that was next.
Right, but it doesn't matter. At least Auerbach knew that he had the foresight, regardless of color, that Bill was ready to coach, and players coach, and it was an excellent decision, and it changed the history of basketball with not only Auerbach, but what about Bill Russell? Who I think is, if I had to put a Mount Rushmore of players, don't sit here and tell me that I wouldn't put Bill Russell on that list. He would certainly get a strong consideration. I wouldn't put LeBron on that list. LeBron wouldn't even make my top 10, to be honest with you. No disrespect to him, but you judge the game of basketball not because of a newer era, but you judge it for 50 to 60 years to get on a list. So, some people will question me that I go out there and no, I'm looking at all the players, okay? And when you create a Mount Rushmore, I can count that 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, and not stretch it with 5, okay, but 4. And Mount Rushmores are nothing but subjective opinions anyways. So I don't think that Red Auerbach ever lost any sleep over it. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he ever bought any stock in cigar companies. Who knows if he bought any in Ybor City, Florida, for all we know, where they make them anyways, or Cuba. I mean, the reality of the situation is you take that stogie and smoke it. I got a follower on Twitter who I think he uses cigars in one of his names, and I don't remember what the last part. I never know what I'm talking about from 1 second to the next anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's a good way to celebrate. He caused my Pistons a lot of havoc back in the 80s, before Detroit subsequently won 2 championships and fell short with the Lakers. But with teams that lose, okay, building on the theme that we started with Sacramento and Detroit, I'll tell you one thing about that Detroit Celtics rivalry. There was a whole lot of respect in that rivalry. There was. Say what you want about Celtics and the Pistons, but when the Celtics lost gracefully, they said to the Pistons, don't go out there. And I remember Kevin McHale being the classiest of them all. Don't go out there and be happy that you're there. Go out there and win it for the East.
Yeah.
And that's what Red Auerbach went out there and did. Everybody, you have the East versus the West, the Lakers and the Celtics, And it was just it was a great matchup when they faced each other. And then the Pistons got in the way. They didn't like it. Subsequently went to Bulls. So, Red Auerbach to me. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead, Scott. You were talking.
Yeah, but the legend of Red Auerbach goes beyond his 16 championship rings. Think of all the GMs he retired because he got fleeced. Dick Vitale. I mean, and the coaches he molded. Well, I'm going to ask you a direct question, okay? And I want you to do the best you can to give me a straight answer on this. And you always do. But when you judge a legacy of an individual, how do you judge a legacy of an individual?
His whole career spanning the whole thing.
Encompassing what?
The whole entire workload from beginning to end.
Okay, well, that's an easy generalized answer, and it's not a wrong answer either, Will. But you they're graded on wins and losses and how many people that they develop, okay, and how many people they mentor that become mentors, that they have that thing called a chain. You follow me? Whether it's a coaching chain, executive chain, and all that. So when you judge and that's what you think. If you wonder how many people that Red Auerbach went out there and developed, whatever your case, you wouldn't be able to figure out how many. I wouldn't, neither would Denz. That's just the way it is.
There would be way too many. The coaching tree is huge.
Well, sure.
To relate on what Scott said, I agree with the younger generation doesn't respect the olden day game. Yes, we all call Michael Jordan, or most of us call Michael Jordan the GOAT. But people don't understand this. Everyone's like, who's your GOAT? I go by era. I go by 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. I don't say, this is the GOAT, end of conversation, you're wrong. No. It goes by era.
And that's an appropriate way to say it,
Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, 70s, Dr. J, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, and that's an appropriate way.
Basketball show dated in this generation, don't take it personally. I wouldn't participate in it because I would gag, okay, about. But the fact is we have one dating back to what we have, which is why it's a whole lot of fun, because that was the best of NBA basketball. And that's what Red Auerbach was. Let's face the reality, those championship banners hanging at and I'll tell you, I saw 2 games at the Boston Garden many years ago, back in the 80s and 90s, and that was an intimidating place to go to the Boston Garden. You ever been to the Boston Garden, you'll know that, the ball just dies on the floor, and there's such a feeling in there that reminds you of you can't describe it. It's like a voodoo where you get stuck in the back all over the place.
What I feel like when I go to old stadiums is like you're like there, but like in your mind you're imagining like back then, like you think you're seeing Bob Cousy dribble up the ball.
Yeah, you could call that. What do you want to call it? Hallucinating a little bit? Is that what they call it?
A little bit,
yeah.
But I'll tell you, I love seeing games at the Boston Garden because you're in awe of the history, and there's a tremendous amount of history. Why do you think they actually found a way to name the new arena TD Garden? Because they wanted the Garden stigma there was obviously a corporate sponsor. So, but that was a great place. That was a place. Everybody talks about what the Yankees, the house at Ruth built. Well, let me tell you, the Boston Garden was long before Red Auerbach there, but the Boston Garden to me back in the day was a house that made everybody realize they made it a ghost house because of everything that Red Auerbach and everybody that followed in that line developed it to become. And that's why he has so many retired numbers and championship banners there. Will, I guess my lesson to you tonight, my friend, is the way you develop a legacy isn't not only based on wins and losses, but how many, whether it's great players you developed and how many coaches and general managers that you breed. So because that's a circle of life. No matter how many of us pass away, somebody's going to develop, and the NBA will carry on for 60, 70, 80, 90 years as every sport will continue to increase. And you need people like that. Everyone talks about over the course of time, George Hallis, for example, with the Bears. Well, and then you talk about Don Shula and all the people that have proceeded to get you where you're at. But it is unfortunate with younger generation because they're tied up with different interests is what they are. That's why you had to speed the game of baseball up, right? Because, and now I saw my second game with the rule changes, never paid much attention to them because it's the same game. Yeah. And, last time when I went there with the Marlins a couple of weeks ago with the Diamondbacks, to me, the bases will always be the same. The rules in general will be the same. You have pots, but it doesn't matter. And basketball, what I would think that Auerbach would turn over in his grave if he saw the product out there today. I'm telling you, this is everything he didn't coach. But I hope that gives you guys a summary about Rad. But remember,
you did great.
He retired Dick Vitale and fleeced him into arguably one of the worst trades that Detroit will ever want to think about doing with the Celtics.
Yeah, and before we move on, I wanted to touch on
and ESPN is thankful for that move. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, of course, because they gained like the GOAT college basketball commentator, right? But now I wanted to touch on 2 points before we move on. One, to Scott's point about knowing the history, and that's it's not just a part of the problem; it's a lot of the problem. Right. Is you got to know the history about things. Think about this, okay? Nowadays in school, right? Nowadays in grade school textbooks, like they actually learn about like 9/11 and stuff, right? Okay, when we were in school, we learned about like the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, and all of that. You know what I mean? It's about knowing the history of how like this nation got to this point. You got to know the history of whatever sport of how it got to this point. Because there was in football, right? There for Tom Brady to be Tom Brady, there was a Joe Montana he had to follow, right?
Right.
And then for Jordan to even become Jordan in basketball, there was to a certain extent an Oscar Robertson he had to follow. Everyone goes behind somebody. Their predecessors and successors. It's kind of how life goes. And I think that's a lot of the problem is they don't bother to learn the history because there's a lot of what happened 60, 70 years ago that bridges to today. I know a lot of it is a different game. But like you said, Scott, there are just some elements that don't change. Baseball has the same 4 bases. Basketball is always going to have a hoop and a net and a court. It's just some elements that don't change. And to Will's point, that is the most accurate way to judge greatness is by era. Here's the problem. The problem is the general fan and the general public feels, no, I don't care if it's been 100 years. I don't care if it's been 200 years. I don't care if it's been 500 years. Back to the Bible days in BC, there must be one king. And that's unfair because it's like, well, you're calling Jordan the greatest, and that's cool, but you need to call him the greatest of his era. You call him Braun the greatest, and that's cool, but you have to call Braun the greatest of it. And then people just get so sucked into that argument, so they're like, all right, fine, Jordan's the greatest. Or, oh, no, but I really feel like LeBron's the greatest or whatever. It must go by era. If LeBron and Mike played in 1996 against each other, then you can accurately say one's above the other, right?
Right.
But Jordan exited the league literally 1 year before LeBron came in. So how could you sit there? Now, they have similar play styles, sure, okay? But this is why we talk about Magic Bird. They played against each other. This is why we talk about Jordan Bird. They played against each other. That's why we talk about Akeem and
Patrick Ewing.
Patrick Ewing, exactly. They played against each other, Whenever we judge that era of centers, Shaq, Akeem, Ewing, David Robinson, they all played against each other. Right. They was kings colliding at the top in a big man game, But to say, oh well, I think that Giannis is better than Shaq. You could point out some things that Shaq doesn't do that he does, but you can't really say that because they didn't play against each other.
Hey, Jens, let me give you a real easy Cliff Notes version of what you said. First of all, Michael Jordan had to get through Isaiah Thomas to win rings. Remember that?
Right.
And I saw those games, gatekeeper. And I remember. So anybody that thinks that there's the greatest of all time, okay, then my advice to you, and I don't know what video games are accurate these days, that I haven't played one in ages anyways, That's video game hypothetical stuff. Is Atari still in business? Because I don't remember what they got now. Or do they have? Is it PlayStation? I have no idea what this stuff is, and I'm too slow to try to have reflexes to figure it out. So if you want hypothetically, it's one thing. I don't really think there is a greatest player of all time. I don't even care about the era stuff. I mean, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But no matter what any of us say, or all of our listeners and watchers are hearing on all your platforms, you know what? You can't sit there and go out there and figure out hypothetical stuff. It will never work. It never will. I don't even believe greatest in any era, because you know what happened with LeBron James if he had played obviously in the Bad Boys era. You know what? He would have to buy Tylenol because of all the headaches he'd have. He'd have to be concussion protocol every other second. Is what he would be in. Because don't tell me that Bill Laimbeer, okay, and Rick Mahorn were going to be easy on him, and they weren't going to be easy on anybody. I mean, I don't care about all this finesse business or anything. I don't even care about GOAT stuff. I don't even care what they talk about with Tom Brady. I really don't. And I'll tell you why. He's got 7 Super Bowls. Great. Okay. How many players are undefeated in the Super Bowls that they participate in? What criteria do you use to define greatness? I'd like to know, because I don't have, to me, my criteria to define greatness is about championships won and whether you made guys better around you.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care how many times you appeared in the championship round. You win 4 and you've been in 10. Big deal. That's okay. At least you won't go ringless like Dan Marino and Charles Barkley and a lot of other guys. That's great. And it doesn't make any difference. The point is what is your criteria for judging greatness? And then how do you personify what the greatest of all time is? I don't think you can. Because if you don't have great coaches, okay, these guys are they're nothings anyway. What was Michael Jordan like before they brought in Phil Jackson and Scottie Pippen? Okay, he was an individual player that got kicked around a lot with no supporting cast. You're going to sit here and tell me that Michael Jordan was 6-0 in the finals, but you have to have a good supporting cast. All these guys jumping from one damn dream team to another to formulate the super team. I'll tell you what, Will, and I will tell you the same darn thing, Denzel, okay, that the dream team situation, okay, will be gone in 5 years. Take that to the bank. You got it on Sideline Sports. You got it on the bank. Okay, take it. It will be done in 5 years. I promise you that. I mean, I do. Because just because you can sit here and put this garbage to work in the Olympics doesn't mean it doesn't translate to regular teams. It doesn't do it. You know, you have to have 5 men on a floor working together, passing the ball. Basketball will never change. You have to pass the ball, shoot the ball, okay, and you get a high percentage shot. These imbeciles today is chuck it from the 3-point line and hope for the best. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what they call that in Vegas? They call it a crap shoot. I call it crap. Okay. I really do, because that's just how it is. So,
yeah.
And, you know, I haven't even had my full allotment of Mountain Dew yet, but you guys have such excellent topics. I don't need it tonight.
But you know what? You brought up a great point, though. It's the exact reason why the USA basketball team has been so successful and why they could slide with putting 5 ball-dominant players out there is because there's not a squad in the world of a team that can beat them. But as soon as they come across, like, say, Mexico gets a team, and they're just blowing everybody out, and they're playing team ball, you know?
Well, we're on Basketbros. Is that the name of our show, right? Basketbros. Let's make sure I'm not losing my mind here, that I'm not suffering from a disease called dementia, spelled DUMBMENTIA. And if you haven't heard it, well, you haven't, because I made it up. Okay, not the other version. Okay, and I'll tell you why. The Dream Team. Once upon a time, when they first came out, all these foreign players were asking these guys for autographs, man. Oh, then again, I wouldn't mind Michaels, Magics, and Birds. Why not? But then all of a sudden, what happened as time went on, the world began to catch up, and nobody was asking for autographs. And what happened after that? They were becoming more cohesive. They were getting better overseas after they got their tails stomped on how many billions of times. So the reality is this: we could sit here and define what Red Auerbach. Now, I will say he's the greatest executive basketball guy all time, because the hardware proves it, the rings prove it. And, you know, executives are what they are, but it isn't because he got the rings and the banners. It's how many people he mentored along the way and developed. That's why I give him the geo. But executives are different. Players is so subjective. Because again, Will, you brought it up, and you too, Denz, the era. Name one darn player in this era that would ever be in my top 5 or any years.
Yeah. Like,
Can you think of one? Maybe LeBron might get a honorable mention.
Mm-hmm.
But they had 3-point shots. When Kareem Abdul-Jabbar set that record for most points, they didn't have the benefit of a 3-point shot. I think he only had made one 3-pointer. So how did if you can get E.F. Hutton on here as a sponsor, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll donate my commission on that to Sideline Sports and all you guys, because you know what, back in the old days, NBA players did things the E.F. Hutton way. They earned it.
Yeah, they did. And before we go on to our next topic, I did want to ask Will something, because you brought up a great point, Scott. And that is, so just think about this, right? When Michael Jordan was playing ball, and nobody was really comparing, doing like, oh, well, I mean, yeah, they were saying like, Jordan versus, but I'm talking about like great versus great. Nobody was really saying, oh, well, Jordan versus Oscar Robertson, or Jordan versus Bill Russell, or anything like that. But it wasn't until LeBron came along that they started going LeBron versus Jordan. And a lot of it was because of the evolution of video games, like basketball games, right? So now, and even, like a little bit back in the 2000s, you had these basketball video games where you can select teams of the past, so you can have these dream matchups. You might get an NBA 2K game where it's okay, well, I'm playing with the Warriors, but I'm going to play against the 96 Bulls. You know what I'm saying? So now, just like that, on screen, you got Steph Curry versus Jordan, So do you think video games is actually a factor? Well,
why?
For the youth, yes, definitely. It strews their mind. It misconceives their mind. They're like, oh, this is how it would be, I guess. No, it wouldn't. Because kids these days haven't seen Michael Jordan play at all. They only watch YouTube clips, or they're too busy playing their video games. Because, it misconstrues them.
Yeah.
It misleads them.
The reality, it's laughable, Will and Denz. It really is. Don't they say playing basketball in the streets of New York and A1A and all this fancy stuff also leads to this kind of play? It's just not the same anymore. I don't care. Yeah,
It's
I
definitely
guess the
not
2K stuff probably might attribute it to a lot. I mean, you're talking a different breed of animal with these kids these days. I mean,
You
and
are.
the reality is you don't have enough minor leagues in basketball. You may go overseas to play ball, but baseball is the best example of anything. At least you have a chance to get here, because there's different levels from the low A to the rookie to double, triple, and the major. So your chance of getting baseball bigger than basketball. I mean, you have fewer roster spots in basketball to actually make the call. But yeah, what, you guys make a great point. Well, Denz, again, 2K, the NBA 2K, these kids don't, until you get out there and you get your head whacked and you're laying on the ground, because of course nowadays with the patty cake bakers man NBA, you won't do it anyways. But even they nail you for a ticky-tack foul, it's just a different animal anyway. But sure, are they influenced by that? Sure, well, that's all they do, right? Why do you think they had to speed the game of baseball up, right? Because everybody's minds are preoccupied in other things instead of the task at hand.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, and in this day and age with the NBA, load management. Oh, good, great. We just spent $50 to $100 a ticket.
Yeah.
Going up.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Hell,
Well,
break.
Moving on to what will probably be our final topic.
Sorry about that. We can't cover a lot of ground, but Jacob, if you're watching out there, I was long-winded so we could save a few of these topics for next week anyways. And you know what? And Denzel and Will were kind enough to let me get it out of there and take this break here
Scott,
that I deserve.
always, your stories.
Scott, this honestly is one of your best performances. I was just back here like,
is that
go,
right?
Man, go.
No,
you guys are great, man. You just let me run the darn football
I
all
don't
the way
need
from
Mountain Dew. This is all the energy I need. I'm like, yep, Scott's won the show.
Scott definitely got 30 carries this game.
You guys are just as fun. Hey, well, I have to admit, though, since you're coming off a wedding and I'm coming off a Marlins sweep of the Cubs, I was ramped up anyway, so no matter. Whatever you gave us tonight, Will, it's better that you gave it to us tonight anyhow. And Jen got me cranked up with the Kings, so, what the heck.
Hey,
man.
Well, we got a few minutes left. Let's talk about our Basketbros Moment in Time. 1994 NBA First Round Game 3. Now, mind you, this was 1 year removed from the finals loss versus Jordan, right? So Charles Barkley tells the sports world he ain't done. He scores 56 points on 74.2% shooting versus Golden State. He had 38 in the first half. Will, your thoughts on this Herculean performance? 74.2% shooting, and he dropped 56. That's nuts. What's your thoughts, man?
It's insane. 74.2% shooting is just crazy, especially when you're a big man. And man, yeah, Charles Barkley is one of the greatest players ever not to win a ring, but the guy was called the Mound Round Rebound. This guy was tough. This guy won the MVP the year before. He was a heck of a college player at Auburn. It was tied for the third highest NBA playoff history in points behind Jordan and Baylor. The Suns would go on to sweep the Warriors. And fun fact, this is his only 50-point game in his career ever, postseason and regular season. So when you do it in the postseason, you know you made a statement and said, NBA, I may have lost the finals last year, but I'm seeking revenge and I'm coming for that title. And I am not stopping. I am a nonstop train. And then in that playoff, in the playoffs, Charles Barkley in 10 playoff games in 1994 had averaged 27.6 points per game, 13 rebounds per game, 4.8 assists per game, and 2.5 steals. He also made the All-Second team that year, and he was an All-Star. But yes, Charles Barkley, this guy, yeah, he's controversial sometimes with what he says nowadays. But like, if you go back and see, this guy gave it his all. I mean, his all, just to win a title. And man, like, this Suns team was no slouch. Also, you had Dan Marley and a bunch of other role players, but Charles Barkley was the captain of the ship per se. And man, what else can you say? But Charles Barkley was a really good player at the time he played.
Yeah.
You're asking me what else I could say? Or you're going to have cauliflower ears when I get lit up again.
All right, awesome commentary, Will. And then to close it out, Scott, your thoughts about this performance? He's talking about a guy that's the size of a linebacker, dropping 56 points on the Warriors, 38 in the first half. I mean, where did this rank as far as Herculean performances that even you've ever seen?
I don't know. I mean, the playoffs. To me, where it ranks is where it ranks. It's going to rank. Everybody can talk about Magic stepping up and beating the Sixers. I think when they didn't have a big man in place and Kareem was out. So, Charles Barkley. Let me just summarize that in a nutshell. Was he like 6'7", 6'6", or whatever? But yet he played like a 7-footer. Is what he did. And I had the good fortune of meeting Charles Barkley last summer. And I'll tell you what, standing next to him being a 5'10", and him, he's still pretty big. And I can tell you, he eats a lot, and he's pretty wide. Charles Barkley reminds me of Canada. He's far and wide. I'm just kidding. But I don't know who's laughing with that. Maybe you are. But Charles Barkley's a heck of a broadcaster. And I told him when we met, thanks for saying everything else we'd want to say. At least you have a bigger platform. And you know what? I agree on about 99% of what he says. I do, because he's telling it the way it is about a bad era of basketball. But let's face it. Again, he played during an era where it was physical. I don't hold him not winning a ring at all, because look at the people that he faced against. That they were considered a buzzsaw. But where do I think it ranks in terms of all time? Well, it's arguably, if you're bringing it up, it has to rank pretty high, right? You guys don't bring up stuff unless they rank high up in history. You know what I mean? So yeah, I can't sit here and say it's 1 or 2, 3, 4, because again, the whole theme of tonight's show should be that it's a very subjective question. Okay,
right?
You obviously remember 74.2% to me means that the basketball was wide, net was wider. Okay, and you're in the zone any more than you have in baseball, where you have the bases being wider and people are going to steal bases. Although after 2 games, I don't notice any changes even with the rule changes because I've been watching the game so long and they're all in the same places and they play the same way. Only you have a difference is the pitch clock means that you're not there 3 hours versus 2 hours and 15 minutes or whatever. But no, I mean,
55 minutes.
right. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, whatever. And now we have a ghost runner, but you know, when you 74.2%, pretty good. But what was Steph Curry's number today to knock out a very cagey Sacramento team? You have to wonder about that too. So, you know, Charles Barkley to me was one of the best players ever in his size, is what he was. He's not no 7-foot center, 6'10" guy. He's a guy that played with a lot of heart, muscle, worked his tail off all the time. And he was around a lot of good players, both in Philadelphia and Phoenix or wherever else he went. And to me, I will always, after meeting the man in person, you know, I always liked him. But when you meet a person in person, you feel like they're very down to earth. You know what I mean? Then you have a much better feel and more respect for that particular individual. I've told you guys all along how I felt about Larry Bird, Coach Bird, okay, and how he's given me a great influence over my lifetime too. So to answer your question,
and Scott, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, no problem. 74.2%, 38. It's a great performance.
Yeah.
And you always say this quote by Charles Barkley on your shows. I forgot what it was, but it always resonates in my mind.
Oh, does that? Well, you know what? If you want to, when we do some sports exchanges or whatever this week, just shout it out to me in the chat room, and then I'll recognize you for it because I know that we've gone a lot. You've had some outstanding topics, and even though Jacob isn't on here, I probably made up for myself and Jacob in one show anyway.
Is Jacob back there with you? Are you telling something, Scott? Is he whispering it? No.
He's hiding behind the curtain. That's why he could go so long.
I didn't catch that well.
No. I said, is Jacob whispering in your ear, or is he behind the curtain?
No, I don't think technology's that good. But you know, Jacob and I have such great chemistry, though. It's like we're crazy brothers that we kind of think the same way a lot philosophically.
Yeah, you guys do.
Well, that is the end of tonight's show. So thank everybody who tuned into Basketbros. This is what we bring you every single Sunday evening: throwback basketball talk and greatest at it. So for myself, Denzel Snipes, also with Scott, Motor City Madmouth, Morganroth. Did I say? I know I said it right.
Morganroth, don't worry about it. You'll get it by the time I get Social Security.
I spelled it. I spelled it right on the advertisement too. Y'all go check him out on the South Florida Tribune. Check him out on the Sports Exchange. It is an awesome show. Wednesday nights, 9 Eastern. 9 Eastern. 9 o'clock Eastern. Okay. I'll make sure I got the time right. Wednesday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern. Himself is on there. Candy Ebbings on there. JB Ellis comes on there, as well as Jacob Christner. You know, they got some really great Trunk and Jeremy B pops on there.
We have a good rotation on that show anyways. We do. So it's
great shows on the network. 100. You got Fire Ups. You got 108 Stitches.
Yeah.
Phenomenal shows, guys. Go check out the South Florida Tribune. I contribute in the comment section. Those guys know their stuff.
Well, you know, and I'll tell you what. You're my MVP, Will. Listen, you're my MVP, Will, in the chat room. So God bless you. Do a heck of a job. And if there's anybody that can research better than you, find them because you're the best. Thank you.
Go ahead, Will.
And guys, I wanted to say this. We are blessed at Sideline to have a partnership with Scott in the South Florida Tribune. We really do.
Now, Will,
we are blessed.
You're an up-and-coming journalist, and obviously, you know, I enjoy working with you when situation presents itself. So great stuff, Will. And I'm glad you had a good time with your wedding. You would have never made this show if you had a New Orleans Hurricane or at Pat O'Brien's. You're just lucky.
Oh, who knows? I'd be outside like, Scott, Denzel, I'm in the middle of the storm.
Now, you'd be laying on the floor. Well, if you had one of those drinks, man, you'd be laying on the floor. You wouldn't be waffling to come on. You'd just be gone, brother.
Yeah. Well, that's our show, you all. So for Denzel Snipes, Scott, and Will, we'll see you all next week. Have a good one.
Yep.